Welcome back everyone to Creator in Conversation. Now this is a very special episode. We're featuring legendary Emmy Award winning casting and voice director Andrea Romano. Now Andrea was one of the very first guest lecturers we had at TASQ Art, where she delivered a masterclass in voiceover acting. What you're about to listen to today is not that masterclass. It's a special interview I did back in my previous place of employment, Pulse College, prior to setting up Tala Academy Sequential Art. At Pulse, I was a program director for a BA in animation, and Andrea, of course, in her career as a voiceover director, who better to speak to about animation and that side of animation as well. So what you're going to listen to is a representation of sorts, but for you listeners, it'll be probably the very first time you'll hear this. And Andrea really goes into depth about her career, about projects she's worked on. It's very insightful. It's one of my favorite interviews that I've ever done, and I hope you enjoy it as well. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Thank you so much, Andrea, for joining us here today and coming in live from LA to us here in Alson Street campus for Pulse College Dublin. I don't know even where to begin, because I think if I was to list your resume, I think I could start the phone book and be finished. I'd be finished quicker. But basically, it's a great privilege to have the opportunity to speak with you, because in our syllabus here, we teach, there is a module called Animation History and Theory and Animation History and Principles, where we go through an exploration of the animation industry all the way from the 1920s to the TV era of the 60s and the Renaissance of the 90s. And of course, as soon as we hit in around like the 90s, it's like, you have been to us this character we talked about in class, but it's a rare opportunity for us to actually, engage. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Absolutely.
And I suppose just in the spirit of, education and like us as a college, just about your own background, I suppose. And then, how did you, what was your field of study? Did you go on to study acting professionally before entering into the industry, or did you have a different background? What was your education?
I grew up on Eastern Long Island at a resort town called West Hampton Beach. And you've likely heard of the Hamptons, which is a beautiful part of the world. But like most kids, you don't know how beautiful it is until you get older and move away and see what the rest of the world looks like. And then you go, oh yeah, my hometown was pretty good. So out on Eastern Long Island, one of 8 kids, very big family. And from the time I was about 10 years old, I knew I wanted to work in the entertainment industry. I didn't know in what capacity, I didn't know what I wanted to do specifically, but I knew that was a field that intrigued me, that I wanted to somehow be a part of it. And when I went away to college, and even though I've come from the Hamptons, which is a very wealthy area, we were not wealthy. We were quite poor, actually. And but I got a Regents scholarship. They paid my tuition as long as I stayed in New York State to do my schooling and went to one of the state schools. So I went to school at a place called State University of New York at Fredonia, which is up near Buffalo, New York. Cold country. I think the winter I graduated, which was 77, it was 40 below zero for weeks on end. It was just horrible. But I studied acting. That's what I decided I wanted to, at least to dip my toe into it. And I thought from there, if I wanted to look at other avenues, I could. And it's only served me well, that training. And I learned so much about theater history. And it's so interesting, as you mentioned, your courses that you teach at your college involve animation history. Learning history is so crucial on so many levels for us not to make the same mistakes, for us to understand how it is we get to where we are in all fields. And I loved acting classes. I loved the process of acting. I loved the idea of doing the homework that was necessary to create a character. So when you went on stage doing a play, I would actually have written myself an autobiography for that character, and I knew what her, childhood was, and I knew what her, environment was like. And I loved that, and I loved that work that actors do. I left Fredonia and went to graduate school at Rutgers in New Jersey and studied theater history as well as acting. And I only lasted a semester there or a year in a 2-year program. I just felt the need to get out of academia, having just been in school for so many years. So I left and I went to Manhattan and worked there for, I guess, about a year. I was in Manhattan. And I was working at a store called Capizio in the Village, which is a high fashion and dance store. And I remember seeing people, I was a cashier there. I remember seeing people like Malcolm McDowell come in and buy stuff. And I remember thinking, this is so crazy that I'm getting to see these people. Years later, I hired him for miniseries that he worked on with me. But it's just one of those interesting things where life comes back at you. And so I was working at Capizio to make money, but any break I would get, I would run off to audition or rehearse a play or do whatever I could. But at that time, we're talking about late 70s, New York City. It was not the same city that it is now. It was dangerous. It was horribly competitive. And I'm talking about just trying to get a slice of pizza at lunchtime or to hail a cab. The competition was so fierce, no less trying to get cast in something. And so I had, from the youngest time, I had seen my friends come to California for spring break, which is right about this time of year. And, in New York, we were freezing. It was maybe, just above freezing temperature back there. These kids would come back from Los Angeles with suntans. And I remember thinking, I need to go to California. I absolutely need to go to California and find it out. And come to find out, years later after that, I found out that I was conceived in Santa Monica. My parents' only cross-country trip was to Los Angeles. And so I had my roots here for a long time. And it wasn't until I came here and moved here that I really started to get my feet under me as far as what kind of career path I could take. And I'm a big believer in testing out a whole bunch of stuff to see what fits the best. Because if you haven't tried it, how do you know? You may be a fantastic chef, but if you haven't tried it, you don't know. There's certain talents, you have, yes, I can sing, yes, I can do this, I'm good at this, I'm good at gymnastics, those things you know. But what I liked about the various courses that I took at Fredonia and Rutgers both, where they gave you a chance to look at all different types of work in the entertainment industry, whether you're producing or directing or acting or building sets or makeup or, wardrobe, whatever. All those things I learned, which gave me a really good basis to come out to California, where I auditioned for everything I could. I should mention, by the way, that I weighed about 200 pounds, which is about 85 pounds more than I weigh now. So I was a character actress. I didn't look like any kind of a ingenue or a leading lady. I was absolutely character. And then when I moved to California, it took me about 4 years, but I dropped the weight, and that was important. I felt like just California has a bigger concern about their health. It just is one of those positive things about California. They concern themselves with their health more. And so we're now at about 1979. I'm in California. And some dear friends that I knew from Fredonia reached out to me. I was living in San Diego, actually, at the time. Reached out to me and said, there's a voiceover agency who needs an assistant for a temporary period of time. And I really did not know about voiceover. Voiceover was not something that was well known at all. This is the time, and I'm sure you learn these in your history classes, when Hanna-Barbera, Filmation, Ruby Spears, and a couple of other companies were pretty much the only people doing daytime animation. It didn't exist yet. And so I found out what voiceover was, and I went and I interviewed for the job, and I got the job. And it was meant to be a temporary job as a voiceover assistant, which was giving actors their call times for auditions, giving them their call times and locations for jobs. And then what I did even though I knew it was a temporary job, I thought, I'm going to take a voiceover class. I'm going to find out what this is all about. And so I took a voiceover class. It was about a 6 to 8 week class. And at the end of it, we put together a demo reel. So I had a really good sense of what actors, my clients, were going through on a daily basis with their auditions. And at the time, we did auditions in the agency, and almost all voiceover agencies were located inside commercial talent agencies. So everybody else there was doing on-camera commercials, and the voiceover, though, were doing animation. Video games didn't even exist yet, so that wasn't a thing. Radio commercials, talking toys, because there were some of those, Chatty Cathy, those things that were toys that had existed for a while.
Thank you.
I was there for, I guess, about a month when the agent who I was replacing temporarily reached out to me and said, I'm not going back. I'm going to go work at another agency. And I really was liking voiceover. And I really was liking being on that side of the glass, as we say, which was on a sort of, not the directing side yet, but not, I wasn't the talent. But I understood what an actor meant when they said, oh, Andrea, you gave me an audition for 10 in the morning, but my voice is so much better at 2 in the afternoon. I get it. Absolutely. Yes. Let me try to make that change for you. Or, Andrea, that audition is at one part of town and you've got me there at 1:30 and then you've got me booked for a gig at 2:30. Clear across town. I'll never get through Los Angeles traffic. I get it. Let me fix that for you. So I had already sort of an understanding of what an actor was going through, not to mention the time they needed to prep for the work, right? So after about 3 months at the agency was called Abrams Rubloff. It was a very large talent agency. It represented people like June Foray and Paul Winchell and Gene Moss and all these phenomenal voiceover actors, Fred Welker. And after about 3 months, they offered me to be a franchised agent, to become an agent. So at one point, I was the youngest agent in Hollywood, which was really kind of cool. And never really part of my plan. I did not plan to work in voiceover. But I did that for a while at this very large agency, maybe 2 years. And then I was headhunted and asked to start a voiceover department in a very small talent agency that had a very good on-camera department. And all their clients wanted voiceover activity, and they had no voice department. So I went over to Special Artists, was the name, started a voice department. Now we're at about like 1982. And really brought in some wonderful people like Dave Coulier from Full House and Roger Rose and all these guys who did lots of promos and just had wonderful voices and developed that. Now at this time, as I'm booking all this talent for cartoons, which there was no bigger cartoon fan than myself. I was just a huge cartoon fan. And I got the idea, let me see if I can go to some of the sessions. Let me go watch what's. So I started to go regularly to Hanna-Barbera sessions because Hanna-Barbera was my favorite studio. I thought they just make the coolest cartoons. And so I got to know Gordon Hunt, the voice director there, and Ginny McSwain, the casting director there. And I would go watch my clients work, and it was fantastic. I loved it. It was just a wonderful time in my life. And then about a year into being at Special Artists, Ginny McSwain, the casting director at Hanna-Barbera, called me up to say she was leaving to go direct. She was the casting director. She was going to go to another studio, Marvel, to direct. And would I be interested in coming and interviewing for the job of casting director at Hanna-Barbera? And I'm telling you, it was like a cartoon. My phone was left spinning in the air as I jumped to my car and ran over to Hanna-Barbera to essentially audition to be the casting director. And they gave me the job. I started the next day at Hanna-Barbera. And I'll never forget being at Hanna-Barbera, casting director Andrea Romano, and people like Dawes Butler, who was equally as talented as Mel Blanc, but just didn't have the publicity machine behind him that Mel did. And you know, I met Dawes for the first time and told him that Huckleberry Hound was my favorite cartoon character. And he spoke to me as Huckleberry Hound. And I burst into tears. I just wept because I was transported back in time to being 5 years old, eating cereal in my feety pajamas and watching Dawes be Huckleberry Hound and Quick Draw McGraw and all those fabulous cartoons that they made at Hanna-Barbera. So I was there for a couple of years, and then Disney reached out to me. And at that point, as I said earlier, Disney did not have a TV animation division. They had shorts, they had theatrical shorts, they had feature films, certainly, but they didn't have any TV division. And they asked me if I would come in and audition for directing 65 episodes, which at the time was unheard of to make that many cartoons. It was either 13 or 26 episodes is what most orders were. 65 episodes of something called DuckTales. And I said, of course I'll come. And so their idea was they were going to have 5 different directors direct the first 5 episodes and then make their choice based on that experience as to who would do the remaining 60 episodes. Thank you to audition to direct an episode. And they didn't even hire anybody else for the last 3 of the tests. They asked me to direct the series. So I was blessed with directing DuckTales. And oddly enough, I don't know how I managed this. I was on staff at Hanna-Barbera casting. And one day a week, I would go over and direct for Disney. And these days, they would never let you do that if you were on staff at one place. But they let me. And it was such a wonderful learning experience for me. And I loved DuckTales, just loved it. And then a bunch of my friends from Hanna-Barbera broke off to form Warner Brothers TV Animation. Again, there was no TV animation division yet. And so they said, at this point, you'll have to become freelance. You can't keep an on-staff job and work for 2 other animation companies. So I took the plunge, and I'll tell you, my life has been filled with luck and risk. And I took the risk, and I said, okay, I'll stop having guaranteed health care. I'll stop having, guaranteed vacation pay, and I'll be a freelance director. It wasn't such a hard decision because the show they wanted me to direct, the very first show they had at Warner Brothers, was something called Steven Spielberg Presents Tiny Toon Adventures. And okay, I heard of him. And so I went over to Warner Brothers, and that began a love affair of 30 years that I directed stuff, always freelance from that point on. So we're talking about 1986, I guess. From that point onward, I was a freelance voice director and casting director. And in animation, as no doubt you guys have learned, it's much more common for us to cast and direct. You'll rarely ever see that on a sitcom, on a TV drama. The casting directors and the directors are almost always separate departments. But voiceover, and especially for animation, many of us cast for ourselves. And I think the reason for that is we know what performance we can get from that actor because we had the audition experience with them. So when I audition people, I run them through the test, the rigor. Will they take my direction? Do they understand? Are they okay with going so big and broad? And do they also understand the small subtleties? How good an actor are they? That's something you really have to check. Voice acting is mostly about acting. I can teach you the voice technique stuff. I can teach you how not to pop on a microphone. I can teach you how not to make mouth noise. I can teach you how to turn your pages so it doesn't make any noise. But I can't teach you acting in a 4-hour recording session. So that was a test too. Auditioning people would let me know how good an actor they were.
Thank you.
And I did that for, as you said, I have an extensive resume. There were times, most voice directors will tell you 3 to 5 projects at any one time is more than just a full plate. There were times when I was casting and directing 11 projects simultaneously, which is just, forgive me, I hope there are no minors listening, but I was an animation hoe. I just wouldn't refuse when a good project was offered to me. I couldn't say no. And so I was lucky enough to direct things like Animaniacs and Pinky and the Brain, and Nickelodeon started calling me. So Avatar: The Last Airbender and SpongeBob SquarePants and so many shows that I admired and really was proud to be a part of. And so it was a career and I retired just before the pandemic. And so that actually worked out very well because the animation industry has changed so much since I began, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But it was when I retired, I think I was only doing about 5 or 6 projects, and I wrapped up as much of it as I could before I retired. And then I was kind of forced to retire because I developed something called optic neuropathy, which is essentially a stroke to the optic nerve. So over a 3-day period, I lost my vision in my left eye. And at the time, the thinking was that, and the research was that within 3 to 5 years, many people who get that get it in the other eye as well. So there was the potential for me to go blind. So I retired so I could go see the world. And so I started to do that. And my husband and I spent a month in Tuscany. We spent a month in Asia. We traveled all over. And then the pandemic hit and put absolute kibosh on travel. So I'm just getting out there again and just beginning to travel, and so excited at the idea that I might be able to come to Dublin next year, which is someplace I've always wanted to go. And we just haven't had the chance to do that. So I'm looking forward to that. Did I completely over answer your question?
That is absolutely amazing. That's exactly, and like, just like everything from Daz Butler, like, again, that's like somebody we just know from our theory classes, but then like, you knew Daz Butler. That's just incredible. Like, and did you feel the energy when you're working on these projects, like something like Animaniacs or Tiny Toons, like, but you feel it even before the project was released that, oh, we're onto something here, like this?
Yeah, yes, you can tell. You can. There's a lot of, Animaniacs specifically, there was a lot of money thrown at that project, as you can imagine. And it was well spent. It's all up there on that screen. You can see the beautiful animation. We had remarkably good voice actors. And the music, my Lord, the music was so good. The clever writing of the songs as well as the scoring of that series was remarkable. And as you're working on it, keep in mind, these were some of my first series. So I didn't have a big picture of, okay, this is going to change the industry. But in fact, they did. Tiny Toons began it. DuckTales actually began it. Tiny Toons continued it, Animaniacs, and then Pinky and the Brain. There was this whole different field of animation, because when I began, there were really a handful of actors who did this work regularly as, I could tell you who they are. There's like 7 or 8 of them. And I'm proud to say that Gordon Hunt and I at Hanna-Barbera, we kind of flung the doors open and said, let's start getting actors into this. People, and Gordon at the time was teaching a lot of acting classes, and had been the casting director at the Mark Taper Forum, which is a very big theatrical venue in downtown Los Angeles. So he knew a lot of theatrical actors, actors who had on-stage experience. And what we learned about that is, because the energy for animation is bigger, broader than TV on-camera acting is, because, TV, the camera's right there in your face, and every little thing you do is huge. On stage, you have to boost everything realistically, but you have to boost it a little bit. So we learned that people with stage experience were very good voiceover actors. They made that transition easily. They understood the boosted energy. It wasn't abnormal for them. They got it. And so we started hiring all kinds of wonderful actors. And then I'm sure you guys recall that way back when, celebrities did not do voiceover. They just didn't. It was kind of looked down upon. I can think of only a handful of celebrities like Anne Margaret and Tony Curtis who worked on the Flintstones. So it was Anne Margaret and Stoney Curtis. But they were kind of the only people, celebrity-wise, who did voices for animation way back when. When I was an agent, let's say, by the time I was a special artist, so early to mid-'80s, people were calling up and saying, hi, my name is blah, blah, blah. I would really like to explore voiceover celebrities. And even more when we got to like 1991 and I started working on series like Batman and Superman and Justice League, people like Mark Hamill would reach out to me and say, I want to be a part of the Batman series. And that was unheard of up till that point. Everybody was very much, it wasn't something they wanted to do. And then it became the thing to do for many reasons. First of all, no memorization, can read right off the script, no makeup and wardrobe, show up in your pajamas if you wanted to, as long as your voice was warmed up. And you got to play characters that you might not be able to play on camera. Very often, if you could do the voice, it didn't matter what you looked like. And so actors, and you could stay in town. So people like Brooke Shields, who reached out to me when she was pregnant, because she did not want to go all over the country or the world working while she was pregnant, said, can I come do a voiceover? Like, yeah, I'll find something for you. And she did, and it was fantastic. And so suddenly it became a completely different field where agents would call me and send me lists of clients who wanted to do voiceover. So the talent pool changed considerably during my time as a casting director and director.
Oh, no, I'm the type of guy, I'm the type of nerd who watches the DVD extras and everything.
How about you?
I watch them. And what stood out to me was you mentioned about the recording booth, but particularly with like Batman animated series, you mentioned Mark Hamill. He's a very physical actor that in the process, you notice you recorded it almost as if it was like old time radio dramas. There was a lot of reaction, and then the physical acting where Mark would take a pose, extend his arms, and then like Bruce Timm or Paul Dini be there to note that as well. That type of blending in, I think that's what worked so well with the longevity of something as, you know, classic as Batman the Animated Series was. Like the visualization animation, of course, absolutely makes it. But then in terms of the voice direction and the pacing as well, the execution is just perfect. Because looking at contemporaneous, you know, animation at the time, because I would have watched, you know, all the superheroes growing up, like Fox's X-Men and Spider-Man.
Right.
You go back and you watch, and then you see like 1,000,001 lines being crammed in. But with BTAS and Superman the Animated Series, you could see the recording and direction before the animation process really benefited and fed into it. Did you have any appreciation or interest or a fan of like audio drama, like radio? You mentioned you were a fan of cartoons, but
Right.
in terms of audio drama as well, or did you come to that later? Was that just a process you developed over?
You know, I was a fan of radio shows, and many of the actors that I worked with back at Hanna-Barbera, we did some 41 new episodes of The Jetsons. The Jetsons had been made like 26 years earlier, its first incarnation. And it was my idea to try to find the original actors. And so I did. I found them all. And so many of them were accomplished radio show actors. You know, Penny Singleton and Janet Waldo, and, you know, so many of these people who they cut their teeth on radio drama. So when Hanna-Barbera in the early, what would it have been, the 60s, when they started casting for the original Jetsons, they went out to the radio actors. They knew those people would be the ones, whether it's Gary Owens and all those guys who did such great voices. And so I kind of benefited from that having happened much earlier than I got into the business. But I realized how delightful it is to work with someone like that. And I admired so much the ensemble record, meaning everybody's there in the room at the same time. And so, for example, you and I are having a conversation. If the conversation started to have this kind of energy, your energy talking to me would change. It wouldn't be this nice conversation. You may get snippy and, you know, respond to my energy. Well, that's because we're communicating one right after the other. If I'm all by myself saying some things, and then a week later you're by yourself saying those responses, we'll be lucky if we get something that sounds like I was talking to you and you were responding to me. A big part of acting is reacting. And when you have an ensemble record, you can react right on the spot. And in a very selfish way, it was much less time consuming to do it that way, because you could run a scene once, twice, 3 times, or maybe get a couple of pickups here and there. Let's get that, or a little mouth click on that word, or give me just a little more energy on that. And then, you know, you have it. You know it's done. If I have to record one actor and get all of his lines, and then 3 days later I record the other actor, I have to record many more takes of each line to make sure that I will have something that will fit together, rather than having to bring those actors back in and re-record them. And of course, the pandemic, right? So many actors who didn't already have recording facilities in their home create recording facilities in their home so they could still work, but they didn't have to go out and be in a room. And I did a little bit of work at the beginning of the pandemic where I was directing, and I also went in to do some voices myself. And what they were doing in the studios was fantastic. An actor would come in, they would pre-mic them. So the actor would not be in the studio with anybody else. They would then put where they thought the microphone would be, and they were almost always really close. The actor would come in, sit down, give a level, record. That actor would leave. They'd open all the doors, air out the studio, wipe it down, give it an hour break, and then another actor would come in, and it's the same thing again. So it was so time-consuming and so, not that, I don't want to say unrewarding. That's not fair. It's just, I so prefer the ensemble experience. I also was selfishly enjoyed the stories and, the brilliant Kevin Conroy, for example, when he would come in and I always kind of like to surprise the cast with the guest stars, and they'd be like, oh, who's coming in this week? Who's going to play? And then to see their reaction when Malcolm McDowell would walk in, or Roddy McDowell would walk in, or, some of these wonderful people that would come to play, and then to hear their conversations and to, watch people who didn't have much experience. They would watch the experienced voiceover actors. So you would have, a Bernadette Peters standing up to look at Frank Welker doing his voices because she couldn't believe those sounds were coming from a human being. Frank was Runt of Rita and Runt fame, and Bernadette was Rita. And so doing that ensemble thing made all the difference in the world to me.
I know, absolutely. And as I said, it shows, like, as the audience, like years later, what the body of work you've left behind of being involved in, like all the series, when you go back and you watch it again, there's always something from, of course, the animation, the story, but then performance. You go back, and that's true art, is when you can go back and go, yes, this is it. Like, you enjoy it when you're a kid on surface level. Then you go a little deeper. Then there's a joke or a delivery you don't get, and it comes back. All of that it's amazing, and it's why the legacy is always going to be there with these shows.
You remind me of the fact that most series want to be like Looney Tunes, the original Looney Tunes. In that, I watched it as a kid. I loved it. I know that a bunch of the jokes went over my head because watching it as an adult, I loved it, and then I got those jokes. But it's the kind of series that's made for our family to sit down and watch together. Similar to Animaniacs, similar to SpongeBob SquarePants, shows that are meant, and even Avatar, The Last Airbender, meant to be enjoyed with a whole family. Something for everybody in that. And that was a goal of mine, was to make it accessible. Where, for example, a show like Plan, I wanted that show to be accessible to females, meaning I didn't want it just to be an action fighty show with, this superhero. I wanted it to be something emotional and touching, and something that women and girls could relate to as well. And so I think that was one of my proudest contributions. Was it was not just a knock'em sock'em action show. It was an emotional show.
No, and that's, I think, exactly as you said, the emotion that comes in, the emotional, performances that came through. I know you mentioned the late Kevin Conroy as well, who was a great friend to Dublin, to Comic-Con.
Coming there, he spoke of it so fondly to me so many times.
Oh, yeah, he was such a good friend, and in particular, he just before his passing, he even recorded something for us here. With the college as well, and we were looking forward to connecting with him again in the near future. But in his last visit, he was mentioning just his performance, particularly in Mask of the Phantasm, that particular scene at the graveside, and he said how he went into this. It was almost like a dark place. He called upon a dark memory, I think it was, with passing of his father, and you were there for him, and cleared the recording room. And that performance, that iconic scene now, like the true emotional resonance is always there. And of course, that performance, and you were like guiding light as well with getting those performances through from the actors. It's amazing.
Thank you for acknowledging that. I take great pride in that. And I always commit to an actor that I won't embarrass them. And I won't let their recording go out sounding bad. I don't ever want to embarrass an actor as far as, why it was a bad character, bad performer, whatever. I rather than that, I will ultimately replace an actor and find something else for that guy that's more appropriate. Maybe I was wrong in my casting or whatever. But those emotional scenes, I remember that instance, and that was relatively early. Mask of the Phantasm was not that deep into the Batman world as far as time, and I remember, at the time, Kevin didn't divulge to me what it was that he was drawing upon, but it was clearly so deep. And I held him in my arms after the recording of that scene. I went into the studio with him and held him and just thanked him for being willing to go there. And I think that set the tone for a lot of other actors who came in to say, you know what, it's okay to go there emotionally for a cartoon, which up till then, cartoons were kind of silly and, nobody took them terribly seriously until we started to make shows like Batman, where really deep issues were addressed. Batman's creation, the creation of the character of Batman, comes from a very dark place. This is a man who is trying to deal with the horror of seeing his parents murdered as a young child and watching his city go to hell. And what can he do? In what way does he? And so there's vengeance, and there's anger, and there's bitterness. And you probably can tell Batman is one of my favorite characters because he was human. He didn't have superhero abilities. He had gadgets, and he was really smart, and he had money, and he had a conscience. He didn't use a gun. He never resorted to using a gun. I remember when we first did Batman Beyond, and those first few episodes that get us into why he no longer can maintain the Batman persona and comes to find Terry McGinnis, and Terry McGinnis becomes our new Batman. Because there's a moment when he considers using a gun, and he's like, that's it. Never again. Never again. And we just talking about that gave me goosebumps. It's just the stories were so good. Batman Beyond in particular was a favorite of mine because it wasn't based on a comic book. It wasn't based on existing material. We at Warner Brothers put that show together, made that show. And I loved the people that I worked with, the crew, the cast, Bruce Timm and Paul Dini and Alan Burnett. They taught me so much about this world that, when I was a kid, we didn't read Batman comic books, girls. Now it's huge, but we didn't back then. So I needed to be educated. I had to go to school to learn about, who is Red Tornado? What the heck is this guy? Where did Two-Face come from? All I had to learn because my exposure to Batman was the Adam West series, which was absolutely not the Dark Knight. It was comedy. So I had to learn a whole lot about what that world was, and I had the best teachers, the best.
That's fantastic. I just have one last question myself, and then we'll throw out to Q&A from the audience. So if there's anyone so I'm actually in a separate room to the audience as well, just for the acoustics and stuff. So if anyone has any questions, just as pre-recording, just prepare yourselves to go up in an orderly fashion, and you can just press the button on the microphone. But before we get to that, my last question, Andrea, is just, we spoke a little bit about, Batman the Animated Series, Mask of the Phantasm, and those some of my favorite, like all time. You've worked on so much, and I know this might be a particularly tough question, maybe like, choose your favorite baby, but is there a particular performance or episode or show that just, or moment that you were involved in the recording, and then you see it through to fruition that just stays you going, like that's one that just really left an impact with you?
There are many of them, and as you said, it's hard to pick your favorite child, but I'm going to forget the name of it now. It's the one. It's the Joker. Return of the Joker.
Yeah.
Loved it. I mean, is that the right name? Return of the Joker. And I think we left the right. Yes. I mean, that was so emotional and so, I think, really beautifully animated. And there's also an episode of Batman the Animated Series called Perchance to Dream, which is an acting tour de force by Kevin Conroy, but a wonderful story that I was so happy. We do our work as in the voice recording at the very beginning. The script is written, and then we record the voices. And then it's a very long time before the animation comes back and we get to check the voice with the picture and make sure we've got everything we need. So I don't always know what it's going to look like. And sometimes because I've done so much other work during those 8-9 months in between, I've almost forgotten. And then it comes back and I get to watch it and I go, that's really good. That's what you had in mind for the animation. Works beautifully. But you were kind enough to give me a couple of questions in advance, and you asked me that question about what my favorites were. And the truth is I have favorites, animation favorites, that I had nothing to do with. I still think one of the best animated feature films is the original Little Mermaid. I think it's absolutely wonderful. It's charming. The music is fantastic. The animation is perfect. I'm a big believer in celebrity voices in animation when it's properly cast. For example, Buddy Hackett in A Little Mermaid is perfect casting. It's absolutely perfect casting. Ellen DeGeneres in Finding Nemo is perfect casting. It's absolutely right. The character, they made it look like her. Her voice was absolutely perfect. So, and that's another favorite of mine, Finding Nemo. And I'll tell you a quick little story before we go to the questions. We can go as long as you need to, by the way, because I'm very verbose and talk a lot. But I hired this kid. I had watched the series Weeds here and watched this guy, this young man, and heard his voice and just said, oh man, I absolutely want him to play Robin for me and something. And I hired him and I brought him in, and it was a Saturday recording, very unusual. Saturday, it was all the time he was available. And I set him up, and I always bring the actor into the studio personally and put the script out for them and make sure they're comfortable, make sure they have their water. And just because, we're so far apart with the glass and everything, and I kind of like a hands-on approach. So I set them up that way. And I turned to this young actor and I said, you've done voiceover for animation before. And he looks at me with those big, beautiful eyes of his, and he says, Emo. And I went, oh, I'm an idiot. Of course you are. I knew that. I just forgot. But it was just one of those moments when you go, here I am. I'm supposed to be a professional in the industry. Completely. This kid was the voice of Nemo. And so perfect and wonderful in Nemo.
And that's your mic drop moment right there.
It was. I was calling, my God. I've lost all credibility with this actor now. But we had a wonderful session, and he did a great job for me.
That's amazing. Have you seen the Howard Ashman documentary on Disney Plus? Just as you mentioned, The Little Mermaid. It's amazing. It's about his whole scoring behind like Beauty and the Beast and The Little Mermaid. It's called Howard, and it's on Disney Plus. If you get the chance, and check it out. Yeah, it's a wonderful documentary, because if The Little Mermaid's your favorite, you're going to want to see that. That's the story behind the music. And
Thank you. I looked that up. Excellent.
So thanks again, Andrea. Again, this is amazing, all these stories in the conversation. Like, this is the type of stuff, going back telling kid me, like I'll be able to have the chance to blow my mind. Like, have you mentioned Return of the Joker? When I was growing up, we had terrestrial TV here. So we had a channel called Sky One, and on national broadcasters, radio, television, air, and RTE. And they would do reruns of Batman and Justice League. But by the time Return of the Joker came out, that came out on Sky Movies, we didn't have satellites. So I was waiting years to finally see that story. And wow, one Christmas as a kid, I always remember, because there's two versions of Return of the Joker. There was a censored and another version. And one Christmas they did like a double bill on TG Caha, which is an Irish dub channel. And I thought, oh, phones be dubbed. But for Whatever Miracle is the Christmas Miracle, they played the undubbed version.
Really?
Yeah, so Mask of the Phantom, so I was like, yes, full focus. And then I don't think I was paying attention, because this is early in the morning. They had the uncut Return of the Joker afterwards. I was like, this is the Christmas Miracle. And the performance in that was amazing. And apologies, I'm probably blanking on the name as well, because in Batman Beyond, Shirley Walker did a lot of the scoring as well. But I think it was, I want to say, apologies if I get the name wrong, Christopher Carter, I think it's.
Yes.
We recently just connected on Twitter, because there's a clip from an episode called Dead Man's Hand from Batman Beyond, and the music in that episode was ridiculous in the best way. I'm like, there was like a 10-second guitar riff that Shirley Walker composed, and we were like at the end of the day, like, it's a work of art, but it's a kid show. But the detail that went in, like, some sort of people, yeah, they love the work. You know, when you have masters, you love the work. It shows. And
it's absolutely true. And it's so interesting that you mentioned those people. I just like Michael McQuiston and Lolita, and they work under the banner of Dynamic Music Partners, they call themselves. And I just saw them all, having not seen them for years. We hosted a memorial for Kevin recently, and I got to see all these people that I worked with on that series, all people who adored Kevin and all who made such remarkable contributions to the series, including, and God rest her soul, Shirley Walker was so stunning, such a wonderful composer on so many of the Batman projects, and taken from us far too early. But then the Dynamic Music Partners then really picked up the torch and ran with it. And it's so lovely to hear you say that you recognize their contributions, because there's so many people involved in making one 22-minute episode, not to mention a 90-minute movie. But it's nice to hear you speak of them, because their contributions were massive.
Oh yeah, no, I was like, that's the great privilege of teaching with Pulse and animation, and all the years I've been teaching animation history and theory, is like, we have to. And I love how you were saying at that about, like, your experience. I'm always pointing, as well as the history side, the T-shape of learning, which is, don't just shoehorn and learn one thing, like, learn the entire pipeline. And when you do find where to fit in, your development will be privileged. Like the T-shape, this is because you understand what comes before and after, because you've done a little bit of everything. You rise when you find your place finally, But it takes our students, 3 years and lots of arguments before they.
Of course, you know what? That is such a good theory, and that is such a good program because you appreciate everybody's contribution when you know what that entails. So, for example, when I was first in Hanna-Barbera, I used to go wander from office to office and poke my head in and say, "Hi, I'm Andrea. I'm the casting director. Let me ask you what you do, and can I watch you do that a little bit?" And so I'd see, character designers or storyboard guys or whatever, and have such an understanding and such an appreciation of what that contribution is, so that when I would get in the recording studio, I'd go, "Oh, you know what? I saw that storyboard page. I know what that is. That's actually, it's not this little quiet thing. It's a lot louder and more, dynamic." So it only helps to learn what everything is that gets contributed into the final product.
Awesome. Now, so I tell you what, we'll try out the questions now, because now there's some eager people to come in on questions. So
good.
So whoever wants to come to the camera first, you should be able to see the mouse should hover over the camera icon and the microphone. So if you just switch on the camera icon as well. I might have to run over to help with
That's
things.
That's good. Here's another. Hey, hello. Hi, William. Hi, name?
I'm Eugene. I'm studying animation first year at this college. Thank you for coming.
Pleasure.
Yes, giving us this talk. Is very informative. And I wanted to ask you a few questions about direction, because it's something that I want to venture in my career in the future. I just wanted to know, like, as a casting director and as a voice director, I guess, what do you look in people when you're in the hiring process? Like, do you just look at people and you just think like, oh, they have like the it factor, or like, what do you look for specifically? How to cast the right people? Because I know that a lot of it hinges on the right cast. Like, a lot of, especially like some of you work like Avatar: The Last Airbender. I think it's like impeccably cast, especially the voice for Sokka, and they all have like distinct abilities. Like, Zuko has a list, which I thought was such a cool addition to his character. So yeah, I was just wondering what you look for that.
Excellent question. I have to give credit where credit is due. I did not cast Avatar. That Nickelodeon had an excellent casting department, and they spent a very long time casting that series, and they did a brilliant job. I agree with you. Wonderful. The main character of Aang in that, the first kid that was hired to play that was so good. He was so wonderful. And, we tried very hard to cast the ethnic background actors of what the character is going to be drawn as. So if it's an Asian character, we'd like to hire an Asian actor. So we found this fabulous Asian actor, young kid, wonderful, recorded him, did an animatic, a test, and he sounded almost like a baby talking, so young. It didn't work. We couldn't use him. So then we hired somebody else who was Asian and Italian and hired him. But ultimately that didn't work either. So the third guy that we hired is the guy that you hear on the voice now. And what was so great about that series was they let him age. They let the character age. As the young actor's voice began to deepen and get older, they started to have the character have pectoral muscles, and his arms got some definition, and the character aged, so the voice seemed right. Anyhow, to answer your question, the first thing I look for in casting is acting. How good an actor is this person? Do I believe them? Do they believe what they're saying? So regardless of what fabulous tricks they can do with their voice, if they can't act, they're probably really fun at a party doing voices, but I can't necessarily hire them, right? So I check their acting first. And this, I think, too, is why celebrities work in animation so much, because we know what their acting is. We've seen them. We watch them on TV. We watch them on film. We know. But rank and file actors, I might not know, so I have to check their acting. Then almost always when we're auditioning, we have character design for the actor to look at. So they know whether it's a little character or a large character, just on big shoulders. Is it a Bruce Timm, big shoulder, small waist hero? Is it, a weaselly little, all those things help the actor fight it. And then what I also look for is, are they directable? So if I say to them, do that same take again, but give me 10 times more energy. And if they only give me one more times energy, it's no, I want you to go farther. I want 10 times more energy. Then maybe they go to 3. No, I need you to go over the top. I want you to go too far and let me pull you back. And if they go there, then I know that they'll trust me and that they'll follow direction. We certainly want every actor to have ideas of their own. That's why we hire actors and not technicians to do voiceover. We want their contribution, acting-wise, their thoughts, what they think. But I need to know that when I tell them, I need you to do this so intensely, but quietly, that they get it, that they understand that's what I want. So I check that as well. I used to compare it to casting a party, because you want someone who's going to bring something to the party. You want someone who's going to have fun with all the rest of the party attendees, the rest of the cast. And you kind of want, I'm going to spend 4 hours in a closed-in room with these people. I want them to be people that are going to be fun to hang out with. And, if you can't have a good time making cartoon voices, something's wrong. You better have fun. And so those are the kinds of things. Did I answer your question well enough?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for answering. I actually had a follow-up question as well.
Huh?
When it comes to directing itself, what kind of, how do you see the vision of, in which direction to direct an actor, I guess? What would you, do you get an impression of what the scene is supposed to look like?
There's that. And there's also, we have to look at every actor individually and what they will respond to. So there's some actors like Mark Hamill, for example. I could throw anything at Mark and he would give it back to me, whatever I asked for. He just will dive in. Some people are a little more shy. And so I'm never afraid to do the actor what it is I want them to do. So if, it calls for, say, for example, you're getting punched in the gut. I am not, sometimes actors who don't have experience doing those kinds of sounds, they'll be embarrassed, right? So I'm not afraid to go, it's like this. It's that sound. And then when they hear me do it and they see me do it, the negative is gone. They don't have to worry about it. The ice has been broken. I'm not afraid to make an ass of myself so that they know that making an ass of yourself is kind of a prerequisite to working in animation. Don't be afraid to make an ass of yourself. So I deal with each actor individually, what they need. And because we had such a limited time in the studio, 4 hours to rehearse and record an episode, a 22-minute episode, one of the skills I learned how to do was to line read an actor without them really knowing that I'm doing that. Because a lot of actors don't like to be line read. But I only have time for them to organically find it 2, 3, 4, 5 takes. If they haven't found it by then, I'm going to do it for them and tell them to echo me. But I did it in a way that wasn't insulting. So say that the line is those two, and the actor just isn't getting it. They're like, you go after those two. You go after, okay, try this. Try this, echo me. You go after those two. And then right away, without waiting, you go after those two. Then they echo me. You go after those two. Got it. Moving on. And then don't make a big deal about the fact that I just line read that act. Because it's not that I don't think they could get there. I think they could. It's just that I don't have the 10 minutes to let them find it organically themselves. At some point, I have to go, we got to move on and tell them how to do it.
Thank you so much, Rance.
My pleasure.
For giving them time. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Eugene. Okay, if anyone else wants to come up to ask a question, just go ahead.
Thank you. If all of you can hear me, thank you all for giving up your evening to spend time with me. I just love that you've done this. It's a pleasure to have you guys there. Hello.
Michael, can you hear me now?
I can.
That's great. Thanks. Again, thanks very much for this. I know it means a lot to Owen and the gang as well. And if you're coming to Dublin, we can't wait to have you here as well. Because
thank you.
Kevin was a great ambassador of Dublin Comic Con, and Rob Paulson and loads of other voiceover guests that came along over the years. So I mentioned earlier on I used to watch the DVD extras. I'm a bit older. I used to read magazines. There used to be like Star Wars and Star Wars magazines. There'd be great photo shots from the studio of yourself with Kennedy and all the other actors from Batman. So it was good actually to see faces and names. Because with radio, you're trying to figure out what the DJ needs. All these personalities. So again, thank you for helping us with lots of our childhood memories, giving us great actors and great experiences and great episodes to watch. My question is kind of similar to the last one in that when you're reading through a script or reading through a character biography, do you often have an actor or a voice in your mind who you think be perfect, or is the fun in the whole casting and audition process?
Excellent question. Tell me your name, by the way.
Oh, Jason.
Yes. It's all that and more. Sometimes I would get a script, and occasionally a writer will write with an actor in mind. They'll say, this is a Carrie Elways type. This is, a swashbuckler like Carrie Elways, or this, in which case I'll try to get Carrie Elways. Or they'll say, they might give me a type, like a character type. This is kind of like Darth Vader, but certainly not James Earl Jones doing, So they'll give me a prototype. Every once in a while, I would read a script, and an actor would just come to mind. It'd just be, who would do this great? Would be Clancy Brown. He would just be a perfect Lex Luthor. Or, and I watch a tremendous amount of TV and now streaming, because I vote on Screen Actors Guild Awards and Emmy Awards, and I take that responsibility seriously. So I try to watch all the things that I'm supposed to vote on, which gives me a great talent pool. And I'm not afraid to, because I've worked for so long and know so many actors, to call up like Nathan Fillion and say, Nathan, I just saw an episode of Castle or The Rookie or whatever, and there was this actor on there named so-and-so. And because I've worked with Nathan so many times, I'd be like, would he enjoy the experience? Would he enjoy the person? Oh, God, yes, Andrea, he'd be great. He's one of us. He's one of those. And then I'll bring that actor in. So because I see so much TV, I'm happy to do that. I also have been working in the industry for so long that I pretty much know the top voiceover actors around. Every once in a while, though, Jason, someone will surprise that heck out of you. There was an incident with Rob Paulson you mentioned. I hired him for one of the movies, one of the Warner Brothers DC movies. And there was an alien of some sort of creature. And as he first did this voice, Bruce Timm and I went, yeah, that's okay. That's kind of a typical alien creature voice. What else do you have, Rob? And I worked, at that point, I'd worked with Rob for about 25 years. So I thought I knew all of his tricks. You feel like you know somebody well enough. And he did this voice. He came out with this sound that I'd never heard of him. And it had a strange kind of it was so interesting and so different. And the way he played with the pitch and it was just, I remember after the session, it's like, Rob, I never heard you do that voice before. That's so fantastic. So you have to keep your mind open to assume that some of the people that you might already know can do other things than what you're sure of. So, and this is, because this is a legality issue. Screen Actors Guild allows me to hire an actor for 3 voices, essentially, for one price. So if I can hire somebody to come in and play man and thug number 2 and bartender, that's financially the best way to go. So you get to learn a lot of the different voices that people can do. And you also get to learn about people who have what we call voices with character. All by themselves, without them doing anything, their voice is recognizable. You know that sound. The guy who did the voice of Winnie the Pooh, the original, that's what his voice sounded like. He really, even when he played the snake in a subsequent movie, you still can tell it's him. That's a voice of character, as opposed to these actors who do character voices. The Tom Kennys, SpongeBob SquarePants, all the different voices he does. They create voices, but it's nice sometimes to get a voice with character in there because it's such a signature, right? It's such a sound. And then you get to meet someone like the brilliant Jim Cummings, who can do Winnie the Pooh, who can do Tigger as well. And, 20 dozen other voices as well. So it was a wonderful career of learning what people can do and testing and seeing what they like.
That's what I was going to ask you, if anybody actually surprised you over the years and just came up with performances like the one that Paul mentioned about Kevin, you're saying about Rob, but between Rob and Tress and the whole gang, was there days on Maniacs where you felt you got nothing done, you're just laughing behind the scenes?
So much. During those years when I was doing predominantly, before we did Batman and Superman and Justice League, I was doing a lot of really silly cartoon shows, really, really silly, laughing. And somebody asked me about it in Woodfield, and I said, the majority of my day is spent laughing. Yes, I work really hard, but everything is so charming. And to watch voice actors just go for it. And they, it's a family. That Animaniacs family was built then. And so Tress and Jess and Rob and all those wonderful actors that came in and, they're still doing some of that work, which is, God bless them, more power to them for it. But it's, they always surprised me with what else they could do.
Right there, because again, you're working and it doesn't feel like work. It's even better.
Correct.
That's good. Thanks very much, man.
Thank you. I hope to see you in March.
Yes. Hopefully we'll get the same way.
Thank you.
Listen, okay, if anyone else wants to come back up then to ask them a question, just go ahead there. I moved it in a room to the slimmer room, so now they all have to navigate through the seats.
Hello.
Hello.
Firstly, thank you for shaping all of our childhoods. It's a pleasure to speak to you. So I'm an aspiring voice actor.
Excellent. I tell you your name.
As Tom.
Oh. Nice.
I was hoping you could look over some of my demo reels and give me some feedback on them.
That's are you serious?
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you feel about right? Excellent. Do they represent your work?
I think currently they do, but I think I need an extra push into the more realistic and, again, more advanced in my career.
All right. Well, if you'll get them to Owen, he'll get them to me.
Oh, okay.
Hey, I'll listen to him. I will.
Cool. Okay, so just have Rory has my email, sent it to me, and I'll get it over then from Rory. Okay.
Okay. I think I've got my website. Can I link that into the Zoom chat?
I'm not sure that I'm adept
Yes.
to figure that out. So you'll send it to me as a through.
Okay. That's good.
But I'll be happy to listen. I'll listen.
Can I ask you another question then?
Please do.
So I saw in some previous interviews that you've done, you talk about asking the actor to play with you. It seems like a very Strasbergian technique, like at least. Is there any other Lee Strasberg techniques that you do for your actors?
When I was studying acting myself, I thought the best thing to do was to study with a bunch of different teachers and pull what worked for me out and dump the rest. So to say that I could tell you exactly from whom I learned what technique, I don't know. I loved Uta Hagen. I thought she was a brilliant teacher. I studied with Bill Esper from Neighborhood Playhouse. So many different teachers. And some things just plain didn't work for me. There's like, I could watch an actor in my class adapt that and it worked perfectly for them. For me, it didn't. The one thing that went over the whole thing was I never responded well to directors or teachers who used intimidation as a way to get a performance from an actor. Actors are really sensitive people. That's what you want. You want them to be sensitive. You want to be able to tap into their emotions. So to squelch that by making them feel bad never worked for me. So I always treat actors the way I wanted to be treated when I was pursuing acting. And so that kindness and that understanding and the desire to get the best possible performance from the actor was always my goal. I never wanted to embarrass them or make them feel bad. I always wanted to, and the proof of this would be after I would audition somebody, and when I finally got what I needed and locked it down and marked it so I knew what it was, I would always say to the actor, is there anything you wanted to do that I didn't let you do? Did I force you away from an instinct that you had that you still think is worthwhile exploring? And if you do, I'm slating, do it. Don't tell me about it. Don't describe it to me. Don't tell me how you got to that conclusion. Just do it. And in that way, I felt like I gave actors a chance to, when I was acting, I always thought, I know some people are intimidated by the audition process. I always thought, somebody wants to see me act. Right? That's what an audition is. Somebody is asking me to come into their office and act for them, or to get up on a stage and act for them, or to get on a microphone and act for them. What a gift. What a little performance I'm getting to do. And so I always wanted to make it a comfortable environment for both the audition process and when we were actually recording a session for the recording session.
Amazing. Yeah, that's perfect.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Okay, so someone else have a question come up to the screen.
How many people are in that room?
I think we're about 8 or 10, I think, within to the main classroom as well. And then we're going to record and send it to our VLE. And what's happening then is we're going to share the Zoom link out to some of the students, because some of our students study across the country as part of an initiative we do here called Springboard. It's funded by the EU. But we're just hesitant with so many on a Zoom. Like, it's okay when we're teaching, but when we have a guest speaker, more can go wrong, and that's connecting to many different groups. We've learned.
Did you tell me somebody traveled in from Wales?
That was actually Tom, I believe, was actually that just.
Thank you for that. I love that you did that. Very cool.
So that's a man on a mission there. Okay. Does anyone have any other questions to come up to the screen? If not, if someone just wants to, give me this, go up and hit the microphone. Yeah, just actually, if you can unmute the microphone. Yeah, if you could unmute the microphone just really quick. Just press it. Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. I just want to see if everyone in the lab present there, if you could just please give a huge round of applause actually to Andrea as well, if you can. So I really need to raise it. The microphone will pick it up. I just want to thank Andrea again for coming along. So thanks so much there, Roy. You can hit the camera and the mic there for us now.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'm gonna end the recording here now. So this is gonna go out. We're gonna send this out onto. We have a YouTube page called Pulse Comics. It's kind of like the comic book side to our college, which is like a student publication. But just before, once we do end the recording, if we can, if anyone wants to get into like a group shot, sometimes you do this at Comic-Con when we have the folk, because we have you on the projector there for everyone to see. So we'll just take you to sit that.
You want to?
But I'll just end the recording here now, just to thank you again so much, because it was a great privilege to talk with you today. And like this particular recording is going to be used and referenced many times in my subsequent classes going forward. Like it means so much for this opportunity to talk to you, and I really appreciate it. And I am looking forward. We will get you over here, Marsh.
So much want to explore all of the things that you're doing as far as this. I know of no other courses like this in the world. So I think it's fascinating and I want to know more about it. So I look forward to that. And Mark, I hope.
Oh yeah, no, thank you so much. Yeah, definitely you get the grand tour.
Oh, that
So thank you again, Dre. I'm just going to end the recording here now and hang on there for a photo.
Thanks very much, everyone, for checking out this episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. We will have, hopefully in the near future, some of the footage from the actual masterclass that Andrea delivered at TASQ Art in the near future. We're just working out the best way to present that to the public at large, so stay tuned for that. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do consider liking and subscribing. It helps us to grow the podcast. Comments are more than welcome as well. And let us know how you're finding these episodes. If there's a particular platform you can't access it on, don't be afraid to reach out. And any other comments or questions you have about the podcast or just TASQ Art in general, please feel free to email us at info@tasqart, that's TASQART.com. So info@tasqart.com. Until next time, this has been a copyright production of Macaulay Consultancy 2025.